What's going on, guys? In this video, we're going to be installing BMR's Demon Killer springs onto our Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat. So these are going to help with weight transfer on our Dodge Challenger Hellcat. We've already got a bunch of stuff helping out in that department. We've got a 15-inch conversion on the back, a ton of power. We fully built the engine here in-house with all MMX components. So it's making about 1,000 wheel horsepower right now. And we need some of that weight transfer to help us with the traction in the rear. So I'm going to go ahead. It's already on the lift. I'm going to lift it up. We're going to pop the wheels off. We've got to obviously get to the springs. So I'm going to walk through that whole procedure with you guys. We'll get the springs changed out, and then we'll see how she sits, how it works afterwards. We're going to be doing a ton of videos and content afterwards at the drag strip, so that's going to be the ultimate test. But let's go ahead and let's show you guys how to get these springs installed. So just went ahead and got this one off and got it installed so that I kind of have the procedure so I can run through with you guys exactly how to get this done. So these springs are definitely taller and stiffer in the front. I think that's going to help with lifting the front end and getting the weight to transfer to the rear, because these were definitely a lot taller and took a lot more compression with our spring compressor. So I'll also link down below. You are going to need a spring compressor tool to get the springs on and off, and I'll link that down below for you guys. They're not much, but you're going to need it at least for the fronts. The backs won't need it, but the fronts definitely going to be needed. So we'll go ahead. I'm going to put this one back in, and then I'm going to go step by step with you guys on the other side. It's a mirror image of both sides on how to get it done, but I kind of want to just get all the tools out for you guys. That way I could kind of run through the procedure and show you guys exactly what needs to be done. All right, so first things first, we're going to disconnect the sway bar. So it is a 21 mil nut and then a 10 mil on the actual link to hold it. So we'll go ahead and disconnect it here. You could take it off from the shock if you prefer, but this is just a little easier to get your wrenches in, and it works just the same, but we do have to disconnect the sway bar. And a little trick for you guys, if you tighten the actual link while you hold the nut after you break it free, it just speeds up the whole process like this. And that's it. Remove the nut, and our sway bar end link is disconnected. Okay, next up, we'll need to remove our upper ball joint. So this is an 18, so we're gonna loosen this off. You could use a ball joint splitter, but I don't always like using them. There's kind of a caveat to them. Sometimes if you use the fork ball joint type splitter, it'll actually rip the boot, and then your ball joint will kind of live a shorter life. What you can do is, especially on like a cast steel arm, once you get this nut loose, don't take it off all the way, otherwise you'll be in for a bit of an exciting time, but get it onto the last few threads, and then if you hit it with a hammer, it'll shock it enough that the ball joint will pop off. There you go, probably the easiest way. And now the ball joint is separated, it's just being held on by the nut. We got a few other items to tend with first before we completely separate these two. So you're gonna want to free the wire for your shock if you have active suspension. And then we're gonna disconnect our plug. So there we go, everything is free to the shock itself. And then I also take off the 10 mil here on our brake line. That way, when we kind of move the suspension, the brake line doesn't have that added tension on it. All right, so the brake line is removed. Now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna loosen our bottom shock bolt here. So there's that. We might have to relieve some of the tension on the suspension, but you can see there, shock bolt is out. Now at this point, we're just about ready to take this off, separate the ball joint so that we can free our shock. It's kind of in this little cage with the upper control arm. What we do need to do though is loosen all of our nuts on the top here. So there's 3 13 mil nuts right here. That way we can get it out. So I'm gonna go ahead, separate this. We'll move our whole suspension assembly this way. It'll give us enough room, and then we can continue to take out these 3 13s, and then the shock will just come out. All right, so we just separated our suspension. We can kind of relax this out of the way. Now, our shock is just being held here by the 3 nuts at the top. We can take out those and get this out of the way. All right, and she's out. All right, so we've got this shock here. So what we're gonna do is get this rigged up. So you wanna put them opposing from each other and somewhere that you can kind of easily get to. So I'm just gonna use a little ratchet just to make things quicker. Get these into place. The stock springs, you're gonna see they don't require as much compression as the Demon Killer ones. And I believe that's just because the other ones are a lot stiffer and taller. So we don't have to compress these a whole lot. So thankfully we don't have to compress these a whole lot. It makes it a little bit faster and easier to get the stock ones off. So these little safety locks put in place. And then what we're gonna do is, this up here, I put a little bit of WD-40 on it to try to kind of help our situation here, but we'll go ahead and we'll zap that with the gun and we'll see how much we can get this off first. This one's actually coming off not too bad, so we'll go ahead, we'll put a little bit more tension on the springs. You'll find it's kind of a balance of putting tension on the actual spring compressor versus having tension on your shock shaft. So, but of course you don't want this to fly off, so you'll know you've got enough tension on the actual spring because you'll start to see the nut come up past the actual top hat. That one actually came off, which was a lot nicer. So if it doesn't come off like that though, there is a 8mm here, and what you do is you suck the spring down so that your top hat exposes the nut, and then what you're gonna do is you're gonna use an 18 and then just get yourself an 8mm, and then you can hold the shock from turning while you get that out. But you'll notice that like this nut will be buried below the surface and you can't get something on it. But just squish the spring down and then you'll be able to push this top hat down and get to the nut. So now with that nut removed, we can go ahead and start releasing our spring. So we'll start loosening up our spring compressor here. You'll notice I'm going back and forth. You want to evenly compress it. You don't want to be like trying to crank it on an angle. So we'll remove our spring compressing tool from both sides. We're going to take off our top hat. Also, be conscious of here. So this lines up right with the end of your spring. So you want to make sure that you line that up. And then also same with the bottom here. This end here goes right here. So there's a very specific spot. Otherwise, you're going to be left with some unsettling springs. So that's it. If there's any dust debris, kind of like you see me doing here, you can, now's the time that you can get this out of the way. If there's any dirt jammed in here or dust, whatever, and then we're ready to go get our new spring. So this is what I was talking about. So here's the stock springs. Look at how much taller the Demon Killer one is. And these are for the fronts. The backs we'll get to, but it's like a good 3 inches shorter. So anyways, let's go ahead and grab our new spring and get it on. Okay, so we'll take our spring. You're gonna see the BMR. They're same left to right, but put the letters facing up. This is going to seat in there. Again, be conscious of the end of the spring on the seat there. All right, so we'll go ahead, we'll put our top hat in here. Again, be conscious of the spring. Well, check out how much taller this spring is. Really shows itself when you get it all here. So now we gotta compress this big old spring. So we'll get our tool on here, try to get as much of a grip on it as possible, because try to get as many coils as you can. If you kind of span it over, it'll be a little bit easier. If you try to just squeeze like 3 of them, then you're gonna be fighting just those 3. Like I said, if you try to take a bite on as many coils as you're able to, you'll definitely save yourself some headache there. So let's see if we can get all the way down here. Ooh, it's close, but we got it. All right, so we'll run this up a little bit just to hold it. And let's do the same on the other side. Our locks are in place, and we're gonna have to just kind of crab walk it back and forth to get this thing to sit down. All right, so we're pretty much there to where we can get this nut back on. So once you see a few threads popping out, we'll get this going. Take your gun, zap it down. That's it. So just double check that nothing walked on you, like the ends of your spring. And we're good. So let's go ahead and we'll retract our spring compressor. All right, and that's it. So double check your work. Top nut here is tight, everything's good. Let's go ahead and reinstall it back on the vehicle. Okay, so next up we're gonna work on the rears, and I fortunately can tell you guys the rears, in my opinion, is a lot less involved. So sure, some guys might take this completely apart, but I'm gonna show you guys a way that you can do this without going crazy. So I just went ahead and did this side just so I got all the tools out and can run through it with you guys real quick. So essentially what we're gonna do is go ahead and support this lower arm here. I think it's actually called a spring link. They have a very weird name for it. But what we're gonna do is support this. So yes, I know you guys, you're gonna say, well, John, you're working on a lift. That's so much easier for you. Even if you're working in a garage, a floor jack right here is gonna do the same thing. What we're gonna do is support this. You're going to remove this bolt and remove this bolt, and this whole spring link is going to drop down and allow you to get the spring out, and that's pretty much it. Only other thing is, in order to get this bolt out, I just had to loosen these exhaust hanger bolts right here. I didn't completely take them out, but just loosen them a bit just to get this to drop down enough that we can clear this bolt, because otherwise when it's up here another inch or so, this exhaust portion interferes with the bolt, so you can't get the bolt all the way out. So got ourselves kind of set up here. So I'm gonna go ahead, start lifting, applying a bit of pressure here. We've got a 18 mil nut here, a 15 mil head bolt there, same sizes here, 18 mil nut and a 15 head bolt. So those are the tools we need. Let's get done. All right, so I got the nuts removed from both of these. So first thing, we're gonna remove the lower shock bolt. So, and you can find the right amount of pressure. You can kind of mess with how much pressure you're applying, and that will make this bolt easier or harder to take out. So just adjust the pressure and that should slide right out. And then next up, again, same thing, we'll adjust the pressure until this bolt will want to start walking itself free. And you can also use a 15 to start walking this out as well. And once you start taking the bolt out, you can kind of see where it's sitting and where it's happening. So again, just adjust the pressure so that your bolt is free. Start taking this out. So there you go, the bolt is slipped out like that. We're gonna just flex our exhaust a little bit, take that bolt out, and now we can lower the spring link and take our spring out. So this is a much easier way to do it, in my opinion. So I ran out of travel, but this is already loose, so I can slide this out of the way. And then essentially you can just drop down your spring link like that, and our spring can come out just like that. So same thing with the fronts. There's this isolator here. You're also gonna see this kind of point area here. That has to correspond with the teardrop in the lower spring link. And then also we've got to get that one off up there because this spring is probably wound a little bit differently. So we're gonna pop that rubber bushing out of there and get this situated. Just before we put the other spring in here, just to compare the difference, you can see that the Demon Killer springs here, the coil is actually a thinner wire. So it should effectively be a softer spring. They're about the same height, I would say, but just a thinner gauge. So should hopefully be a little softer. Let's get it in. Okay, so here's the top isolator. Grab your spring, make sure the writing is facing up, and we're gonna wind it into there. So that end piece stops right there. And grab our lower isolator here, same thing. We're gonna wind it in until the end of the coil lands right there. Now we can go ahead, we'll get this situated. Again, make sure that teardrop goes into the teardrop on the lower spring link. Feed this up here. Put that in the top seat. Teardrop is gonna fit right in there. Now we can put either your jack or your stand, whatever you're using. Also, you'll notice there's a stand in the front because you don't wanna relieve too much pressure off the back and possibly have an issue on the lift, but because you're doing it on the floor, because you guys know the deal. So anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and put that underneath and push this up. All right, so steps are gonna be the reverse. So we're gonna push the spring link up, and then we're gonna get this bolt in here first. I've got a punch also where you can kind of use it, or anything, a screwdriver, just to kind of help guide it into place if you need to, but just keep an eye on things, make sure everything is in the correct position. Top isolator is in the right spot, teardrop is in the right spot. Continue to go up here. All right, so looks like we can probably get our bolt in here. Good sign. Check the other side, kind of keep an eye on it. We gotta go up a little bit more. We'll run in this bolt. So you might have to manipulate the other side a little bit just to get your lower spring link in place, but just run the bolt in. There we go. So now we're gonna come over here. You might see this a little short, so you're gonna take your jack or safety stand, whatever you're using, and you're gonna press up on the bottom here or here to get this to line up. All right, so here we go. We'll take a look. We're way off, so we gotta go up. Hole's starting to come into position, pretty much there. Should be able to get the bolt back in. Boom, look at that. Super easy when you kind of use the right tools and work with the geometry of the suspension. So there we go. We'll throw the nuts back on, tighten all our hardware, and we can relieve the pressure. Okay, so double check your work. Make sure all of your hardware is tight, and then also make sure you tighten up your hangers for your exhaust, and we're done back here. Side note, if you guys do not have BMR's Cradle lockout kit, go and get it. This makes a huge difference, you guys, on your performance, keeping this cradle in place and make sure it doesn't dance around, giving you better traction. And I'm sure if you guys are putting in these Demon Killer springs, that is the goal here. All right, and I went ahead and put the front shocks in. Really nothing to it, you guys. Same steps as taking it apart. So go ahead and throw the assembly in there. I ended up putting the 3 nuts on the top, and then I swung in the bottom, and then afterwards I went ahead and installed this upper ball joint here, and that's pretty much it. So just make sure all your hardware is tight. Let's go ahead, throw the wheels on, set this thing down. It's gonna definitely take a little bit of settling, so I'll show you guys kind of after moving the car around and maybe taking it for a spin what it looks like. All right, guys, so here it is. I ended up driving it for probably a few weeks. I've just been super busy working on a bunch of stuff, but I wanted to give the car a chance to settle so that you guys could get a visual on how this would sit. So I will say it does sit slightly higher in the front, which is to be expected. The way that this setup works essentially is it puts slightly stiffer springs in the front and softer springs in the rear so that you get that weight transfer. That's the whole idea behind this, is to get some weight transferring to the rear tires for better traction. So with my stock SRT Hellcat springs, I feel like the back was a little bit higher and the front was maybe a tiny bit lower, but honestly, on second thought, it's pretty much the same in the front. It's really not too much taller in the front, but definitely I would say a little bit lower in the back. It's hard to really tell because I don't obviously have a square setup on this. We've got 20-inch front skinnies, 15-inch conversion rears, so it's hard to get an exact profile because these are probably a little bit shorter than those, but you can kind of get a feel on how it sits. As for how it handles, you definitely feel the front pop up a lot more when you're on the gas. I want to get some actual data for you guys, see how this thing hooks at the track, because at 1,000 horsepower to the wheels, a street setup, it really, honestly, it's going to be hard to get traction on the street unless you're warming up the tires and all that kind of stuff. But you definitely feel the front pop up and it transfers weight to the rear. So this setup is going to be the ultimate spring setup that we can get for this car. So that's gonna be a wrap for this video, you guys. I wanted to show you guys how to install this, and then we are going to be at the track here shortly. It is like ridiculously hot here in Florida, definitely not drag racing weather. It's like 100 degrees plus the humidity factor. It makes it like 110 here. Definitely not good DA for the drag strip, but we're getting everything geared up so that once we get some better weather, we can really go and hit things, and a couple more parts on this car. If you guys haven't seen already, check out my other videos. We installed a bunch of stuff from BMR that is going to help put the power to the ground, and also check in the description below. There is a coupon code for you guys. If you guys want any stuff from BMR, you can use our code down in the description below, and that will get you some money off of anything from BMR. So we're hooking you guys up. Make sure you click the link down below, use that coupon code. Give it a thumbs up before you take off, subscribe, check out the other videos. See you guys on the next one.